Wyoming Territory, spring of 1873, the wind howled low over the Snake River, dragging the scent of pine and snowmelt through the cottonwoods. That was the day Isaiah Jennings saw a woman drop to her knees at the riverbank, screaming for someone to save her baby. He had not planned on stopping. He was trailing cattle north, dust in his throat, saddle sore and ready for nothing more than sleep. But the scream, it cut through him like a knife. Isaiah kicked his gelding into a gallop, his rifle bouncing at his back as he rode hard toward the river. The woman was waist-deep in the freezing water, her dress soaked and heavy, her arms outstretched. "There," she cried, pointing to a bundle drifting toward the current, wrapped in a blanket and fast sinking. Isaiah did not think. He jumped from his horse, boots hitting the mud hard, and waded in. The cold was like a slap to the face. He reached the bundle just as it dipped under, grabbing it with both arms and hoisting it above the water. A baby, face blue-lipped, eyes shut tight. He turned back, teeth gritted, the water dragging at his legs. The woman met him at the bank, hands trembling as he passed the baby into her arms. She dropped to the ground, sobbing, clutching the child close. Isaiah knelt beside her. "Is she breathing?" The woman pressed her ear to the baby's chest. Yes, barely." "Come on," Isaiah said. "We need to get her warm." They rode double on his horse, the baby pressed between them, wrapped in Isaiah's coat. They made it to his cabin by dusk. 2 rooms, stone hearth, roof patched in places, but warm enough. He lit a fire fast and stoked it high, dragging every blanket he owned from the chest. The woman did not speak as she undressed the baby and held her near the hearth. Only when the child let out a weak cry did she finally exhale and break into tears. Isaiah poured coffee with shaking hands. "What happened?" She looked up, eyes rimmed red. "They tried to drown her. My husband's parents, they said she was a curse." Isaiah stared at her. "Your own in-laws. My husband died last winter, fever. I had nowhere else to go. They took me in, but they hated her, said she'd bring more death. This morning, they dragged me out of bed and took her. I chased them. I thought I was too late." Isaiah's jaw tightened. "What's your name?" he asked. "Tess Rylan," she whispered, brushing hair from the baby's damp forehead. "And this is Kira." He looked at the small girl, her lashes fluttering now in sleep. "I am Isaiah Jennings," she nodded, her hands still trembling. "Thank you for saving her." Isaiah stood, watching the firelight flicker over their faces. "You and Kira can stay here tonight." "Longer if you need." Tess looked up sharply. "I do not want to bring more trouble to your doorstep." "I do not care about trouble," Isaiah said. "What I care about is that baby breathing and you being safe." Tess pressed her lips together, nodding once, eyes shining. That night, he gave Tess his bed and slept near the hearth. Kira whimpered softly in her mother's arms, but she was warm and alive. Isaiah lay staring at the ceiling, listening to the crackle of logs and the soft breath of the child he had pulled from the river. He told himself it was only right to help a mother and her baby. Nothing more. But when morning came and he saw Tess standing in his shirt by the fire, hair loose down her back, baby cradled to her chest, something shifted in him. Something quiet and deep. She looked at him, eyes steady now. "We will not go back. I will not let them near her again." "You will not have to," Isaiah said. "You can stay here, both of you, as long as you want." Tess hesitated. "Why would you offer that? You do not even know me." Isaiah crossed his arms. "I know enough. You fought to save her. You did not give up. That is more than most." Tess watched him. "You saved her. You risked your life." He looked down, unsure what to say. "I could not let her go under." She moved closer, Kira asleep in her arms. "I do not know how to repay you. You do not need to," Isaiah said, voice low. But Tess reached out and touched his hand. "Still, thank you." Her fingers were warm. He did not pull away. The next days passed quiet. Tess cleaned the cabin, helped with the cooking, and watched Kira grow stronger. Isaiah taught her how to feed the chickens, how to pump water from the well. They worked side by side in the dirt, her skirts tucked and sleeves rolled high. He started to look forward to her laughter, to the way she hummed old lullabies while rocking Kira. Each night after supper they would sit by the fire and talk about nothing and everything. The weather. Her favorite books. his childhood in Tennessee, her dreams of seeing the Pacific. One evening, as the sun dipped low and bathed the land in copper light, Tess stood on the porch with Kira on her hip. Isaiah came up beside her, wiping sweat from his brow. "She likes it here," Tess said. "The air. The quiet." Isaiah glanced at her. "And you?" She looked up at him, her face soft. "I feel safe." He nodded, throat tight. "You are." That night, Tess put Kira to sleep in the crib Isaiah had built for her, then stepped out to the porch. Isaiah was there, staring at the stars. "Thank you," she said again, voice quiet. He turned to her. "You do not have to keep saying that." "I do," she said. "I need you to know what it means, what you did." Isaiah exhaled slow. "I just did what was right." Tess stepped closer. "No, you did more. You gave her a chance. You gave us a home." Isaiah looked at her, really looked, at the woman who had run into a river for her child, at the mother who rocked her baby through every storm, at the strength in her shoulders, the fire in her eyes. "I would do it again," he said. 100 times. She reached up and touched his cheek. "I believe you." He leaned in without thinking, but stopped just short. "Tess." She closed the distance, pressing her lips to his. It was soft, sure, full of everything they had not said. When they parted, she smiled. "I am not afraid anymore." Isaiah touched her face. "You will never have to be." Inside, Kira stirred in her sleep, safe and warm, and out on the porch under the stars, Tess and Isaiah stood hand in hand, hearts steady, breath easy for the first time in a long, long while. By late May, the snow had melted off the ridges and the pasture turned soft with new grass. Isaiah built a fence line around the south slope, working with quiet focus while Tess moved between the garden rows, coaxing potatoes and beans from the earth, one careful seed at a time. Kira lay swaddled in a shaded crate lined with wool, waving her small fists at the sky. They did not speak of the river that first day again. Not once. But something unspoken passed between them in the way she handed him nails before he asked, or how he always remembered to fetch water before she ran out. Not affection spoken aloud, something steadier than that. One evening, Tess stood at the table sorting through a bundle of worn cloth. "I need to stitch a few things for Kira. She's outgrowing what little I brought." She held up a strip of faded muslin. "Your old shirts, may I use them?" Isaiah leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. "Anything in that chest is yours now. Take what you need." She nodded, tracing the edge of the fabric with her thumb. "I used to sew for the neighbor girls back in Missouri. Their mothers worked the fields, so I'd help with mending. Never thought it would matter much later. You've got a skill most folks would envy." She looked over her shoulder. "What about you? Who taught you to build like this? That crib, that fence post, none of its guesswork." "My father," Isaiah said after a pause. "He was a cooper by trade. Said if a barrel leaked, it was a man's shame. Taught me to work careful, measure twice, cut once, that sort of thing." Tess smiled faintly. "He must have been proud of you." Isaiah shifted his weight. "He died before I left Tennessee, never saw the land out here. My mother went soon after." Tess set the cloth down, her expression softening. "You came here alone?" "I reckon I did." A silence passed, close but not heavy. Outside, a meadowlark trilled from the cottonwood. Tess stepped toward the hearth and stirred the beans simmering in the pot. "I used to picture the West as something wild and open," she said, "but I never thought it could feel quiet like this." Isaiah crossed the room and poured water into the tin basin. "It's quiet until the storms come. Then the wind'll shake the door clean off if you don't brace it." Tess turned slightly, a corner of her mouth lifting. "You never married?" He shook his head. "Thought about it once, but she wanted town life. I didn't." Tess glanced down at her hands, then at the cradle where Kira slept. "I never thought I'd be raising her out here. I wanted to teach before I married. Had a letter from a small schoolhouse in Abilene. Then my husband's father sent word and everything changed." Isaiah studied her face. "You still could. Teach, I mean." She looked at him, surprised. "Out here, children'll come," he said. "People settle where the land's kind, and you've got the way of someone who listens first. That matters." She tilted her head. "You notice things most men don't. I've had to. When you're alone, you learn to read the signs." Tess stepped nearer, close enough that he could see the faint sunburn along her collarbone. I'm not used to someone seeing me, not really. Isaiah reached for her hand, careful, slow. I see you. Her breath caught, but she didn't pull away. I used to wonder if I'd ever feel safe again. You are, he said, and not just because I say it. She looked at their joined hands, then up at him. You've given us more than shelter. Isaiah searched her face. You've given me reason. Later, after supper, they sat on the porch while Kira slept, the sun bleeding out behind the ridge. Tess leaned into his side, her hand resting on his thigh, and he didn't move, just let the warmth of her settle there. A hawk drifted over the tree line, catching the last light on its wings. I want to stay, she said quietly, not just for a while, for good. Isaiah turned his head toward her. Then stay. I want Kira to grow up knowing what it means to be safe and loved. She will, he said, voice steady. So will you. Tess turned her face into his shoulder, a deep exhale slipping out of her like something she'd carried for too long. They stayed there until the stars came out, the air cooling around them but the space between them warm and certain. Isaiah didn't speak again, and neither did she, but something in the silence was already a promise. By early June, the cabin settled into a quiet rhythm. The kind that comes when people trust what tomorrow will look like. Isaiah rose before dawn, feeding the stock and checking the perimeter fence before the heat set in. Tess often woke to the sound of his boots on the porch, Kira tucked into the crook of her arm, dawn light sliding through the chinks in the shutters. She'd dress quietly, careful not to wake the baby, and pull water from the well before setting bread to rise. The days were long, but they belonged to them now. One afternoon, Tess stood by the root cellar, apron dusted in flour, squinting against the sun. Isaiah was splitting cedar near the corral, his shirt slung over a fence post. His back was slick with sweat, but his swings were even, each log cleaving clean. She called across the yard, "You're going to wear yourself out before supper." Isaiah paused, resting the axe in the dirt. "You saying I should leave the fence half-built? I'm saying you could finish it tomorrow. The world won't fall apart overnight." He looked over, brushing sawdust from his brow. "You planning on chasing me off the land so you can plant beans where the barn ought to be?" "I might," she said, smiling. "They grow better than horses." He chuckled low, then straightened and walked toward her, wiping his palms on his trousers. "I was thinking of building a loft above the lean-to. We could store seed, maybe even add a cot come winter." Tess tilted her head. "Expecting company. Might be we'll need more space." "Kira's not going to stay small forever." She looked down at her hands, the way the light caught on her wedding band, still worn on a knotted cord beneath her blouse. "You think we'll still be here then?" Isaiah's voice was quiet. "I'm counting on it." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped past him and opened the cellar door, the air inside cool and damp. "There's a sack of dried apples down here I forgot about." He followed her down the steps, ducking his head beneath the beams. As her fingers brushed the burlap sack, he said, "I was thinking this morning. When we go into Elk Hollow next week, we ought to pick up a few things for Kira. She's close to cutting teeth. There's a woman there who makes willow rattles, might help soothe her." Tess turned to him, eyebrows slightly lifted. "You want to buy her a rattle? She's your daughter," he said. "But she's mine now too, if you'll let her be." Her mouth parted slightly, and for a long moment she didn't speak. Then she stepped forward and laid her hand against his chest. "Do you mean that?" "I've meant it since the second day." "Maybe sooner than that." She looked up at him and her voice dropped. "I've never seen a man look at her the way you do, not even her father." Isaiah took her hand in his. "All I know is I want her to grow up knowing she belonged here. That she was wanted every minute." Tess leaned into him, her forehead resting against his collarbone. "You don't know what that means to me." "I think I do," he whispered. They stood there in the dark cool of the cellar, the dust motes floating in the shaft of light from the doorway above. When they climbed out again, the sun had dipped lower, and the wind carried the scent of pine and warm dirt. Later that evening, Tess sat by the hearth finishing the last stitches on a tiny linen shirt, her needle dipping with steady precision. Isaiah carved a length of cottonwood near the door, smoothing edges with his blade. He watched her from the corner of his eye, the way her brow furrowed when a knot in the thread slowed her work. "You ever think about naming the land?" he asked. She looked up. "Why? Feels like it's more than just a spot on a map now. Seems like it deserves a name," Tess considered. "Something plain or something hopeful, something true." She folded the finished shirt and set it aside. "Then maybe Callahan's Rest." Isaiah looked at her, puzzled. "That's someone you knew." "It was my grandmother's name. She once said rest wasn't about sleeping, it was about knowing you didn't have to keep running." He nodded slow. "Callahan's Rest, that's good." Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the cottonwoods. Isaiah rose and bolted the door, then turned to her. "You should rest too," Tess shook her head. "Not yet, I want to watch her sleep a while." He crossed the room and stood behind her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "Then I'll sit with you." She leaned back against him, and they stayed like that, quiet, the baby breathing soft in her cradle. The stars blinked to life outside, and the world, for once, did not ask anything more of them. The sun rose behind a veil of low clouds, painting the sky in soft grays as Isaiah hitched the wagon for the trip into Elk Hollow. Tess wrapped Kira in a red wool shawl, tying it snug around her shoulders before settling her on her hip. The child reached for the reins in Isaiah's hand, and he let her touch the worn leather. "You sure you want to come?" he asked, glancing down at Tess. "I need thread and salt, and I'd rather choose the kettle myself than trust you to guess what makes a decent boil." He nodded, lips twitching. "Fair." They rode slow, the road muddy from the week's rain, the wagon wheels cutting deep grooves through the ruts. Kira dozed in Tess's arms, her breath light against her mother's neck. Tess kept her eyes on the hills flanking the road, scanning the brush for movement. She hadn't spoken of her in-laws since that first night, but Isaiah noticed how she tensed whenever they passed another rider. "You don't have to worry today," he said. "They've no right to you, not here." "I know," she murmured. But knowing something and feeling it aren't always the same. He didn't press her. He only tightened his grip on the reins and kept their pace steady. They reached Elk Hollow by noon, the town quiet under the overcast sky. A few wagons lined the street, and the blacksmith's hammer rang out from the far end near the livery. Tess stepped down first, holding Kira close, her gaze drifting to the schoolhouse nestled behind the chapel. "She's going to walk soon," she said. "I've seen it in the way she pushes against my lap." "She'll be chasing chickens by next season," Isaiah said, looping the reins over the hitch post. "You think you'd want her in that school when the time comes?" Tess watched the children through the open door, their slates balanced on their laps, the teacher's voice carrying faintly through the air. "I'd want to teach her myself until she's ready. Letters first, numbers. And stories. There's a place for that," he said. "We'll make it." They moved through the mercantile together, Tess selecting a few yards of calico and a tin of lard. Isaiah picked out a small wooden rattle, its handle smooth and pale, carved with a faint swirl. He didn't show it to Tess, just tucked it into his coat pocket without a word. When they stepped back into the street, a man in a black coat crossed their path. His eyes landed on Kira, then Tess. "You're Rylan's girl," he said. "From over near Alder Creek." Tess's spine straightened. "I was." "Not anymore." Isaiah stepped forward, his body angled just enough to block the man's view of her. "You need something?" The man raised his hands. "Only surprised is all. Word was you died last winter." "I didn't," Tess said, "and I'm not going back." He looked at Isaiah, then back at her. "You sure about that?" Isaiah's voice was low. "She answered you." The man hesitated, then stepped aside, his boots scraping against the boardwalk. "Didn't mean trouble." Isaiah waited until he was out of earshot, then turned to Tess. "You all right?" "I am," she said. "I said what I needed to." They didn't speak again until they reached the wagon. Isaiah helped her up, then settled beside her, the reins once more in hand. "I didn't think I'd ever have to speak his name again," Tess said, eyes on the road ahead. "He worked timber for my husband's father." "Watched everything, said nothing." Isaiah didn't look at her. "He won't come near you again." "No," she said. Not with you beside me." They rode in silence for a long while, the sound of the wheels and the distant call of crows the only company. When they reached the ridge above the homestead, Tess touched his arm. "I've been thinking," she said. "About what we're building." He slowed the team. "Tell me." "I want to plant a row of gooseberries near the back fence. My mother used to say you can tell the strength of a place by how well it bears fruit." He smiled faintly. "Then this place will hold." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "I believe that." That evening, Tess tucked Kira into her cradle, then walked out to the porch where Isaiah stood watching the tree line. She stepped beside him, arms folded against the cooling air. "I want to take your name," she said, voice even. "Not for protection, not for show. For us." Isaiah turned slowly. "You sure? I'm not the girl I was. I'm not Tess Rylan anymore. I want to be part of what we're making here, all of it, you, her, this land." He reached for her hand, fingers warm against hers. "Then you'll be Tess Jennings. And I'll be proud to say it." She didn't cry. She didn't falter. She just stepped into his arms and let him hold her as the last light faded behind the trees, the cabin behind them glowing steady with firelight and the sound of their daughter's breath rising like promise through the stillness. The summer heat settled in slow and steady, coaxing the wheat to shoulder height and sending dragonflies skimming over the creek at dusk. On the edge of the south field, Isaiah stood beside a stacked wagon bed, hammering the last plank into place for the small storage loft he'd planned. Sweat gleamed at his temple, but his hands moved with calm purpose. Tess watched from beneath the shade of the cottonwood, Kira asleep in a sling across her chest. She held a folded letter creased and weathered, the ink slightly faded from the saddlebags Isaiah had brought back from the post the day before. "You're not going to ask what it says," she said. He didn't turn. "If you want to tell me, you will." She stepped closer until she could hear the soft thud of the hammer against wood. "It's from a woman I knew in Missouri, Sadie Klein. We were girls together. She wrote to ask if I was still alive. Said someone came through town, said I'd drowned." Isaiah looked over then, quiet and steady. "You want to write her back?" "I do," Tess said. "But not just to say I'm alive. I want her to know we're building something here, that Kira's safe. That I found someone who doesn't ask me to shrink just to fit beside him." Isaiah set the hammer down. "Then tell her that." Tess glanced toward the house where the scent of stewed cabbage drifted from the windows. "She used to say I'd never settle, said I was always looking toward the next hill. But when I look out across this land, I don't feel like I'm waiting anymore." He stepped down from the wagon and wiped his hands. "You're not. It's yours now, ours." She smiled, a quiet curve of her mouth. "There's a peace in that." Isaiah reached out and trailed his fingers over Kira's shawl. "She's growing fast. You notice how she watches the chickens like she's learning their secrets. She'll have her own coop by next spring if she has her way," Tess said. They walked back to the cabin together, their steps easy. Inside, Tess set Kira in the cradle Isaiah had lined with fresh wool earlier that morning, then turned to stir the pot hanging over the hearth. "You ever think about the winter?" she asked. "Things we'll need, what it'll be like." "I cut enough wood to last through January," Isaiah said. "We've got salt pork, dried beans, and I'll take the wagon west come September to trade for flour. That's if you don't mind me being gone a day or two." Tess turned, her apron dusted with flour. "I'd rather we go together. Pack up Kira, make a trip of it. I don't want to spend another season waiting at a window for someone to come home." Isaiah's hand found hers as he passed her a plate. "Then we'll go together." That night, they ate by the open window, the breeze cooling the room as the sun dipped low. Kira fussed briefly before settling back to sleep, one hand curled near her face. Tess folded her napkin and looked across the table. "I never asked what you want," she said. "Not for the land, for yourself." Isaiah leaned back, his eyes on hers. I want this. A life that doesn't feel like a wound. A place to put down roots, someone beside me who sees the same road ahead." She was quiet a moment. Then, "I want to marry you." He didn't blink. "I hoped you'd say it first. You waited?" "I wanted you to ask because it's yours to choose. Not something taken, not something owed." She reached across the table and took his hand. "Then come with me to Reverend Harlow on Sunday. We'll do it proper," he nodded. "You'll wear that blue calico, if you'll shave for once." He laughed, and she leaned in to press her lips to his, slow and certain. "I love you, Isaiah Jennings." He touched her cheek with the back of his hand. "And I love you, Tess." The wedding was quiet. Reverend Harlow stood beneath the cottonwood, the same tree where Tess had once stood with Kira nestled close. The town's schoolteacher brought wildflowers, and the woman who ran the post office gave them a sack of hard candy and a small wool bonnet for Kira. Tess wore the blue calico. Isaiah wore a clean shirt and his best boots. When they said their vows, Kira clapped her hands and laughed, and the sound carried out across the field like a promise. They returned home to find a neighbor had left a smoked ham on the porch with a note that simply read, "For Jennings and his girls." That night, after the dishes were set to soak and the baby lay between them on the quilt, Tess curled into Isaiah's side. "You know what I want next?" she asked. He looked down at her, fingers grazing her back. "Tell me." "A second garden, far side of the fence line, something just for herbs and flowers, something that doesn't have to feed us, just grow." He kissed her temple. "Then we'll plant it come spring." She drifted into sleep with his arms around her, the sound of frogs rising from the creek and the wind easing through the trees. And so the days came, and the land shaped them as much as they shaped it. Isaiah taught Kira how to tie a lead rope. Tess started a small reading circle for the neighbor children under the cottonwood. They raised hens, traded wool with nearby ranchers, and learned the rhythm of each season, its labor, its rest, its quiet goodness. They did not speak often of what came before. Not because it hurt, but because it no longer needed to be said. What mattered now was the life they built by hand and heart, day by day, with nothing borrowed and nothing owed. And when the first snow came, soft as ash over the roof and fences, Isaiah pulled Tess close beneath the quilt and kissed her slow. "You still glad you stayed?" he asked. She smiled against his shoulder. "I never left, not really. I was just waiting to come home." Their home stood through every season that followed, steady and warm as the love that lived within its walls.